Senator Thune.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your leadership of this fine committee and hard work that we've accomplished here in the last couple of years, and hopefully there'll be some more to come. Maybe we can get something done on this next year, but thank you for your leadership, and thank you and Senator Cochran for having the hearing today. And as we kind of wrap up this year's Congress and look at next year's priorities, I think the Commodities Exchange Act reauthorization will be one of many pieces of legislation that we're going to have to consider. I want to mention one area of concern which we've discussed before in this committee, and that has to do with staff guidance letters that are not subject to the Administrative Procedures Act and its mandatory cost-benefit analysis requirements. The letters have the same regulatory effect as rulemaking. Also want to mention no-action letters, which has been referred to earlier, which are used to amend or withdraw new rules, and would encourage you, Mr. Chairman, to take a more measured and conventional approach to issuing regulatory guidance. Commodity futures trading continues to be becoming increasingly important to the agricultural community, especially in states like my home state of South Dakota, with agriculture as its #1 industry, and because of currently lower commodity prices, managing risk is even more important to our farmers and ranchers, grain elevators, cooperatives, and suppliers who utilize the trading tools under the jurisdiction of the CFTC to better manage their risks. So appreciate you being here today, and hope you'll continue to put that appropriate focus on agriculture. I wanted to mention in your proposed rule excludes certain legitimate hedging activities used by agricultural businesses from qualifying as bona fide hedging. So what is the CFTC doing to ensure that those legitimately hedging their risks will qualify for the exemption afforded to bona fide hedgers?
Well, thank you for the question, Senator. It's a very important area. We've received a lot of comment on the proposed rule, and particularly on the subject of bona fide hedging, and we're taking that very seriously. We had a very good roundtable earlier this summer with a number of industry participants where we talked about this, and we recognize hedging strategies are often very complex. And the challenge for us is, again, to try to write bright line rules that work, that distinguish between the bona fide hedging, which we want to allow, and preventing the excessive speculation. We're in a situation where we can't look at people's intent. We can't look at particular transactions, so you have to come up with that bright line rule. And we've asked industry for suggestions in that regard, so that we make sure the rule does work to allow people to hedge commercial risks. It has to. I mean, these markets are so fundamental. We recognize the importance of that. I think all the commissioners recognize the importance of that.
CFT and banking regulators recently proposed margin rules that would take effect in December of next year. I understand the deadline was set by a group of international regulators some time ago under the assumption the rules would be completed by now, and I also understand that these changes would force the industry and their end user clients to implement massive system changes which could take years to develop. Do you think this timing is realistic given that the rules have not yet been finalized?
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for the question. I think that first of all, the margin for uncleared swaps rule is extremely important, because although we've mandated clearing of some products, there will always be uncleared swaps, and that's why we need a margin rule. I think it's important that we implement it in a way that works. We don't want to disrupt the market. But I would say that most financial firms are already taking margin for these uncleared swaps. We are now 5-6 years after the crisis, and a lot of them were taking margin even before that. Many of them obviously have increased that. We want to, though, come up with a good implementation timetable. It's delayed implementation as it's written. It generally doesn't apply to end users, commercial end users. Our rules and the prudential regulators' rules exempt end users. And we want to do it in a way where we're coordinating internationally, because we don't want a situation of regulatory arbitrage. So I hear the concern. We're working on it. But I think we should try to get this rule in place as quickly as we can.
Are any of your international counterparts talking about perhaps a longer implementation period?
There is discussion currently that we're also part of, and people are balancing, well, would this really be needed or not? We've received some comments from industry saying a delay is needed. We'll certainly look at that. I think sometimes we have to look at these proposals for delay with, a good amount of skepticism. That's part of our job. But we will certainly try to come up with, a reasonable approach here.
Okay. Yesterday, first Agricultural Advisory Committee meeting took place, and I'm wondering if you can share with the committee kind of what you see as the role of that committee in making future regulatory decisions, and is it going to be a committee that is created simply for symbolism purposes, or will we really look in a substantive way to that committee for advice when it comes to making some of these decisions, particularly with regard to agricultural commodities?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for the question. I think it's extremely important. It's a very good vehicle for us to get input. We have about 40 members representing a number of interests in the agricultural sector, whether it's producers or the co-ops or financiers or others. We had a very good meeting yesterday. I'm committed to having a couple of meetings a year. We are also consulting with the members about the things that they want to talk about and want to share with us. So I think it will be extremely important to our efforts to gather input. I think generally you have a commission today, 4 commissioners who all are very pragmatic, who are all listening to market participants' concerns as well as to this committee, and who are very committed to working together to try to do the right thing.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Madam Chair.